Welcome to the Chosen Podcast. I'm Jake.
And I'm Jess. All right, let's dive deep into The Chosen. Specifically, Matthew and Simon in episode 4, the rock on which it is built. We've got a ton to unpack here. Analyses of Matthew's character, the whole episode breakdown, and even snippets from the actual script.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the show puts these two guys, a tax collector and a fisherman, on this path that leads them both to Jesus.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that happen? Like you're stuck working with someone, and at first you just can't stand them.
Yeah. All the time. First impressions can be so misleading. And like with Matthew, he's portrayed as a total outcast.
Totally. The sources really paint him as this disliked guy just because he's a tax collector. There's even that part where Quintus makes a joke about Matthew having a dog.
Right. But that's a bigger deal than you might think, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Back then, dogs weren't seen as pets,
Yeah.
They were like vermin. That little detail really highlights how isolated Matthew must felt. Rejected by his own people, working for the Romans.
No wonder he buries himself in his work. All that meticulous record keeping. Maybe it's his way of finding some control in a world that's constantly rejecting him.
Possibly, yeah. And maybe this need for control plays into why he's so focused on Simon. Remember when Matthew says, "No one listens to me, not like they do you."
Oh, yeah. Not like they do you. He's almost envious of Simon's natural charisma.
Yeah, charisma that Matthew definitely doesn't have.
True. But he's not just like admiring Simon from afar. He's spying on him for the Romans. Makes you think, is there something more to it than just, work?
That's a good question. I mean, Matthew's smart. He's observant. Maybe he sees in Simon a way to belong, a connection he really wants.
And then there's that whole miraculous catch a fish thing. You can practically see Matthew's brain working overtime trying to process.
That scene is huge for him.
Yeah.
His whole logical, analytical worldview gets flipped on his head. He has to start considering things that are beyond what he understands.
Okay, but we can't forget about Simon, right? The guy is under so much pressure, debt to the Romans, betraying his own friends to survive.
It's a no-win situation. Leading the Roman soldiers, but sabotaging them at the same time. He's stuck trying to please the Romans and protect his community. Actually, there's a Jewish concept, pikuach nefesh. It basically says it's okay to break a law if you're saving a life.
Huh, that's interesting. So he's not just being selfish, he's trying to juggle all these different moral things. And then there's that scene with his wife, Eden. She's not holding back, telling him he's lost his faith, that he's trying to fix everything himself instead of relying on God. Oof, I think we've all been there at some point.
Yeah, trying to carry the weight of the world on our own to common struggle. But there's this hypocrisy here, right? Simon's mad at Matthew for working with the Romans, but he's betraying his friends to those same Romans.
Whoa, good point. It's like he can't see what he's doing, and this leads him right to Jesus, doesn't it? He's desperate for forgiveness to get out of the mess he's made.
Exactly. He's hit rock bottom. And then we get that scene where he's fishing all night and catches absolutely nothing. You can feel the frustration pouring out of him. He starts yelling at God.
Yeah, it's intense. Even Matthew's dog whines. I can feel Simon's pain.
The writers did a great job mixing humor and tension. It keeps the story feeling real, relatable, which makes what happens next even more powerful. Just when Simon's at his lowest point, Jesus shows up.
Okay, this is where it gets good. Jesus is teaching from Simon's boat, and he's using fishing as this awesome metaphor for the kingdom of heaven. And then he tells Simon to cast his nets again.
And Simon's exhausted. He's done. He tells Jesus it's pointless. They haven't caught anything all night. It's like he's so focused on what he thinks is true that he can't see the possibility of something else.
And then, boom. Fish everywhere. The boat's almost sinking. It's pure chaos. And Matthew's there on the shore just watching, completely speechless. Can you imagine witnessing that?
Yeah, it's a moment of pure awe, like seeing God's power right in front of you. And for Matthew, it's another crack in the walls he's built around himself. He was already intrigued by Jesus. Now he's seen this incredible miracle. It's got to be planting seeds of faith, even if he doesn't realize it. Makes you wonder if anything is truly impossible, right? And for Simon, it's not just awe, it's a turning point. He falls to his knees in front of Jesus, calls himself a sinful man.
Yeah, huge difference from the Simon we saw just a minute ago, yelling at God. Now he's humbled, realizing his own flaws.
He's like all that guilt and shame he was carrying, trying to do everything himself. And then he finally lets go, surrenders. He's ready when Jesus says, "Follow me."
And he just goes for it, drops everything, nets, debts, his whole life, and follows Jesus. Andrew goes with him, and then James and John. It's amazing how quickly this group of disciples forms.
It really shows you how powerful Jesus' message is and that need in their hearts for something more. Oh, and there's this great little detail. Zebedee, James and John's dad, takes that giant catch of fish to market to pay off Simon's debt.
It's such an incredible act of grace, you know? Zebedee doesn't judge Simon for his past, just helps him out. I wonder how that act of kindness impacted everyone around them.
For sure. It shows how connected their lives are, how one good deed can spread outward. And speaking of good deeds, let's go back to Matthew for a sec. We talked about him being isolated, drawn to Simon, but the sources also talk about how intellectually curious he is. He's always watching, thinking, trying to figure things out.
Quintus actually calls him a single-minded machine at one point, which is a pretty good description of Matthew. You know, he's the one keeping all those detailed tax records for the Romans. That takes a sharp mind.
Right. And it's that same curiosity that draws him to Jesus. He's not just watching the miracle happen, he's trying to understand it.
Maybe it's similar to how he watches Simon. Like he sees something in both of them that he wants that easy way they connect with people. Do you think there's this longing to belong in Matthew's story?
I think you're right on the money. Matthew's world is small, lonely. He's surrounded by people, but not really connected to any of them. Maybe he sees in Simon and Jesus a way out of that, a chance for something more.
But the funny thing is, Simon's totally oblivious to what Matthew's going through. He's so caught up in his own problems, he just sees Matthew as part of the Roman system he hates. Which is ironic because both of them are trapped in systems they hate.
Definitely a parallel there. They're both outsiders forced to make tough choices to survive. Simon betrays his friends, Matthew collects taxes. They're both part of the problem.
And it's the miracle, the fish, that changes everything for them. For Simon, it's surrender, waking up. He sees his own brokenness and accepts what Jesus is offering.
And for Matthew, it's one more step toward faith. Like, it proves that there's something more going on than just logic and numbers. He's starting to see that miracles can happen, that maybe there's a power greater than himself.
It's cool how the episode also shows how important faith is in all this. Like how Andrew's so sure Jesus is the Messiah, even when Simon doubts it. It's Andrew's belief that leads Simon to Jesus.
Absolutely. Faith isn't just a private thing. It affects those around you. Andrew's faith sets the stage for Simon's transformation. And then Simon's surrender opens the door for Matthew to become a disciple later on.
Talking about transformations, that scene where Zebedee pays off Simon's debt, it's such a perfect example of forgiveness, like real, tangible forgiveness.
Right. It shows that forgiveness is more than just words. It's about doing something, helping someone who's struggling, even when they messed up. Zebedee doesn't judge Simon. He gives him grace and a way out of his situation.
It's a great example of what the gospel's all about. And it shows the importance of community, too. These characters are all connected, their choices impacting each other.
Yeah, and that sense of belonging, being part of a community, that's something Matthew really wants. Remember we talked about Quintus joking about him having a dog, how isolated he was. But now, meeting Simon and Jesus, he's getting a taste of what it means to be part of something bigger.
He's starting to find where he fits in, a place where he's valued for more than just his smarts. Like there's this seed of hope growing inside him.
You could see it starting to grow in how he reacts to the miracle.
Yeah.
He's not just surprised, he's touched, drawn to what caused this crazy event. It's a turning point for him, just like it was for Simon, but in a quieter way.
Before we move on, I want to mention that part where Simon's yelling at God while he's fishing. It's so real, so relatable. Everyone's felt that frustration, that despair when it feels like no one's listening.
Totally. It shows that faith isn't always easy. There's going to be doubt, anger, questioning. But even then, there's still grace and even humor. Remember Matthew's dog whining when Simon yells?
It's like the writers are giving us a little wink, you know? It reminds us that even in dark times, there's still laughter and connection, and that sometimes those struggles are what lead to breakthroughs.
It's through Simon's brokenness that he finally hears Jesus. And it's Matthew's curiosity and openness that draw him to something bigger than himself.
So much to think about, right? We've talked about Simon's journey from despair to redemption, Matthew wanting connection, and the power of faith and grace to change lives. But there's still more to uncover.
There is. And that leads us to the episode title, The Rock on Which It Is Built. It's such a powerful phrase, and it connects to Simon's future as Peter, the rock of the church, and to the beliefs that shape our own lives.
It really makes you think, what are those rocks in our own lives? The things we believe in, the experiences we have, the people who shape us.
Yeah, it's a good question to think about. And this episode really explores that, not just with Simon, but with the whole story. We see redemption and grace everywhere, from Simon meeting Jesus to Zebedee forgiving him.
You're right. And it all comes together when Jesus tells Simon and the others to be fishers of men. It's such a powerful image, leaving the old life behind for something new.
And it's not just about their little community.
Yeah.
Fishing for people. It means spreading that message of love and grace to everyone.
It's funny how Matthew and Simon, they start out clashing because of their jobs for Rome, but they both end up finding hope and redemption in the same place. Shows you that Jesus' message can reach anyone.
Exactly. Faith can bring people together no matter who they are. That miracle with the fish, it's like a symbol of that unity, all that grace that's there for everyone.
And it's not just spiritual, it's practical too. Like when Zebedee pays off Simon's debt, it's love and forgiveness in action.
It reminds us that grace isn't just talk, it's doing something. Helping people even when they screw up. Zebedee could have judged Simon, but instead he chooses to be kind and generous.
And that choice changes everything, right? Simon's debt is gone, his family is safe, and Zebedee shows everyone what true community looks like.
It shows how connected we all are, how one act of kindness can make such a difference. And we can't forget about Matthew watching all this happen. He's still on the outside, but you can tell he's getting more and more curious.
He's soaking it all in. The seeds of faith are there, and he's starting to question what he thought he knew. Seeing the impossible happen, it's shaking him up.
He's starting to see that there's more to life than logic and numbers. He's witnessing how faith and love can change people, and it's drawing him in, even if he doesn't realize it yet.
So, as we finish up this deep dive, I'm left with this feeling of awe. Episode 4 of The Chosen is a really well-made story with complex characters, big ideas, and real human emotions.
It's a good reminder that even when we're broken and feeling lost, redemption is still possible. Grace is always there, and real community can heal us and change our lives.
Those are some powerful things to remember, aren't they? As you go about your day, think about the rocks in your own life, the things you believe in that guide you. Be open to miracles, even when they seem impossible. And remember that grace and forgiveness can change everything.
And don't be afraid to be like Andrew. Share your faith with people, even when they have doubts. You never know. Your belief might change someone's life.
Thanks for joining us on this awesome journey. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into The Chosen. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep searching for truth.